The vibrant seaside city of Brighton, home to nearly 500,000 people, for the next 3 months it will play host to the most exciting and significant battles for the forthcoming general election. After 13 years of Labour control, the MP for Brighton Pavilion is stepping down from his 5,000 majority seat, and as nationally support for Conservatives and New Labour wanes, a surprise third candidate has joined the race, becoming an outsider favourite. Local Labour blogger Dan Wilson explains.
Brighton Pavilion, which is one of 3 Brighton and Hove seats, is probably the most interesting race, certainly in the South East, and one of the most interesting in the country, it's a 3-way marginal. It's currently held by the Labour MP David Lepper and Nancy Platts, the Labour candidate's hoping to succeed him. And the other 2 candidates are Caroline Lucas, the leader of the Greens, and a recently selected candidate for the Conservatives called Charlotte Vere.
I met with Conservative candidate Charlotte Vere at her campaign office as she was preparing for the forthcoming Conservative Spring Forum. Taking a break from speech writing and her campaign work, she was keen to tell me how Brighton was ready for change after 13 years of Labour control.
I think Labour has to stand on its record, and its record is absolutely appalling. And the way that I see it is that there's going to be, and also the the candidate that's standing for Labour, she's very nice, but she's very far left. She occupies a very specific space within the political spectrum, very similar to Caroline Lucas. And so I think a lot of people who might have voted New Labour will look at that and say, actually, no, that's not what I wanted. I'm not as socialist as that. I'm more central. I like public services, but I want to have a job, and I think our public sector deficit needs to be kept under control. And all of these things, I will pick up those voters because that's exactly what we're going to do.
We have got a maximum of 70 days between now and the general election that we must win.
The following weekend, and all eyes across the city were on David Cameron as his party made their annual visit. But the Green Party wasn't taking any notice of this. Dozens turned up at their action day to canvass the city, and I got a chance to speak to party leader and local candidate Caroline Lucas about the difference she would make if elected as the first Green Member of Parliament.
What difference will one more Labour MP make, or one more Tory MP? Who even knows how many Labour and Tory MPs there are? The first Green MP will be able to punch above our weight. We will really be able to put Brighton Pavilion on the map. And this idea that Greens wouldn't have allies, I'm afraid, isn't true either. There are progressive people in the other political parties, people that I know and I'd be very happy to work with.
That evening, the Brighton Theatre Royal was playing host to a Green Party fundraiser featuring the likes of Russell Howard and Alistair McGowan. I managed to speak to the night's organiser, Marcus Brigstock, about why he was backing Caroline's campaign.
She should be in Westminster because she will offer her services and her voting record and her conscience to the people of Brighton Pavilion, and I think that will serve them really well. I don't live here, it's none of my business, fundamentally. It's not going to rock anybody's world, but I think we're going to end up with a hung parliament, and I think the more independent voices, not that she's independent, she's Green Party, but the more voices who are not answerable to a massive party machine in Westminster, the better.
Inside her Preston Park offices, Labour candidate Nancy Platts had been busy involving herself in local campaigning. Keen to play up some of her old Labour credentials and history in the unions, she defended Labour's 13-year record.
We can point to concrete things that have been delivered in Brighton for Brighton people. New medical centres, new GP surgery, we've got a walk-in health centre open 7 days a week for 12 hours a day near the station. All of those things are things that benefit the whole community, and that's what Labour stands for. It's about the core values of making sure that we have public services that are accessible to everybody and available to everybody.
The Brighton Pavilion constituency took its name from the Royal Pavilion, a palace that sits at the heart of the cosmopolitan city. Built for King George IV at the turn of the 19th century, the Royal Palace was brought by the people of Brighton in 1850 for the sum of £85,000. Today, the average property price in Brighton is nearly 3 times that amount and has risen 133% between 2000 and 2008, pricing many younger residents and first-time buyers out of the local property market.
Greens have been doing on the council, for example, is trying to ensure that whenever there's new developments, that as big a proportion of that as possible can be ring-fenced for social housing, for affordable housing. We want to look at more support for housing associations as well, looking at more innovative ways of ensuring that people can get their first foot on that ladder.
Affordable housing is a huge issue down here, partly because we've got quite a large section of the population commuting to London where the wages are higher. I think ultimately we're going to have to take a look at the housing market and try and bring in some kind of regulation around house prices. Otherwise, young people are going to be simply priced out of the market.
Brighton has weathered the global recession better than many other cities across Britain. But employment still fell here by over 1.5% between the end of 2008 and 2009. The candidates spoke to me about their policy to tackle the economic downturn and local unemployment.
The Conservatives have already said locally they're cutting £600,000 off the budget, and nationally the Conservatives are going to cut £200 million off the budget. That's going to have a major impact on poorer families, and what Labour are about are continuing to invest in public services in order that we can continue to deliver to lots of people.
It's about who do the cuts benefit. There are going to be cuts. So are they going to benefit Cameron's rich mates, or are they going to benefit the many, for want of a better phrase?
What we have to do is we have to have more effective public services, get more value for money. So it's perhaps looking at different ways of running our public services and making them more answerable to the local community, rather than just chucking huge amounts of money at it. Because I've been in business for 20 years of my life, and I don't know a single business problem that is solved by chucking huge amounts of money at it.
We think inequality matters, and so what we want to be able to do is to shift to more progressive taxation, and that does mean people on higher incomes paying more, but it also then means that you've got more resources to be able to implement things like a higher minimum wage or indeed a living wage. So what we want to do is to really address that huge gap of inequality in this country.
One issue affecting the large commuter population across Brighton is the train service that delivers high-speed journeys direct to the capital. Over 5,000 people have signed a petition on the Downing Street website to strip First Capital Connect of its franchise. I spoke to the candidates about just what they proposed for improving public transport locally.
We have an interesting situation here where we have one of the rail companies who's failing. Now, we've had Nancy Platts and Caroline Lucas knee-jerk, take their franchise away. Great. That's probably not going to help anybody. Should we try and solve the problem in a more sensible and grown-up manner? So I have already done a train survey, got a huge number of responses back, people telling me what they liked, what they didn't like, what they think should improve. People talked about timetabling, they talked about the quality of loos, they talked about the number of seats, they talked about rolling stock. Very fascinating. I took all of those views, I put them into one document, and I went and saw the Managing Director of FCC. I did something about it.
First Capital Connect, which we've had a campaign to say that they should lose their franchise because they're simply not delivering an effective service. I mean, longer term, the Greens would like to see railways brought back into national ownership. We want to renationalise the railways. I think most people would agree that the experiment with privatisation has been fairly disastrous, with fares going up, with services going down in terms of their quality.
My belief has always been in a publicly owned, publicly accountable railway, and I stand by that. I don't think that the First Capital Connect franchise is working successfully, and I think the solution is to bring it back into public ownership so that it delivers for passengers.
Only one of the three candidates currently resides in Brighton, but they all told me of their great affinity for the city and why they should be trusted with the seat.
I spent a lot of time in Brighton when I was younger, about 20 years younger. I was at university in London, and I had some friends who used to come down a lot, so I used to do that. And I think the way that I look at it is that, I'm a new generation Conservative. I'm exactly what somewhere like Brighton Pavilion should have as their Conservative MP.
Brighton Pavilion is an incredibly interesting place. I mean, it has a population that feels very strongly about politics. I think people tend to be very interested in it. It's a city of very strong communities, and it's a place, of course, where the Greens have traditionally done very well, where the official opposition on the City Council alongside Labour. We've got 13 councillors. We've got a real reputation here for delivering on the actions that we pledge. And so it seemed, a very good place to try to get that first foothold at Westminster.
I love Brighton. It's a great city to live in. I moved down when I got selected, so I've been living here for nearly 3 years now. I used to work in the trade union movement and the voluntary sector and the public sector, and I've done a lot of work representing people either individually or individual causes. And what I wanted to do was take that passion and that commitment into Parliament and represent people in Westminster.